7:30. All right. I call this meeting of the Public Safety Committee to order. I should have the microphone here. We'll start with affidavit of posting here. This agenda was posted in the office of the county clerk on the 10th day of June, 2021. Notice was sent to the West Bend Daily News, Express News, WIBD, WMBZ Radio, WTKM Radio, My Community Now, Hartford Times Press, Kewaskum Statesman, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Okay, so for roll call, everybody is here except for Supervisor Gannering. I have not heard that he would not be here, so I guess he is unexcused. Let's see, Pledge of Allegiance and moment of silent prayer. Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, there was a software error with the software that's used to create the agendas. So item number 4 was not supposed to be on the agenda. We're not kicking Jim out of his vice chair position. So we're going to move past that to the consent agenda. I need a motion to approve the consent agenda. Okay, moved by Supervisor Marquardt, second. Okay, second by Supervisor Milliken. Any discussion on the consent agenda at all? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, say aye. Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, passes unanimously. Next up is discussion items, and our first one is our COVID-19 procedural update regarding the jail. So I'll turn it over to Sheriff Schulteis.
All right, well, thank you very much. So we have been getting some questions from a variety of different people and entities about why our jail has been slower to open after from the pandemic, including defense attorneys, even constituents. And I thought maybe it'd be beneficial. I don't know if public safety has been fielding any of those types of calls from constituents, but I thought it might be beneficial just for our jail captain to kind of explain what we did for COVID and what we're doing, the process that we're doing to fully open up. So Captain Lehman, if you don't mind. So I'm going to be a little bit more of a MC in this, leaving a lot of these topics up to our department experts rather than hearing it from me. Department expert.
Hello, good morning. I'm sure we're all kind of sick of talking about COVID-19.
Yes, we are.
So I'm glad to be speaking on this today. So going back all the way to March of 2020, seems like a long time ago, but that is really when our operation started to become greatly affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. That's kind of when our meetings all started kicking off and planning and creating strategy on how we were going to protect our inmates and staff. So jails are considered congregate or shared living facilities. So we had to follow the CDC guidelines along with.
Hey, Captain,
yes.
Can you be closer to the microphone just so we can sure it's picking it up on the live stream?
Sure.
Thank you.
So jails are congregate living facilities. Similar to other facilities in the county, we had to follow CDC guidelines and to make sure that our operations were safe and healthy. Some of these changes that we included really started kicking off on March 13th. That's when our initial set of restrictions where we suspended all contact visits between inmates and professional visitors being attorneys and probation agents and the like. During normal operations, they meet in contact meeting rooms within the jail. We had to suspend all of that. Those kind of meetings with the probation agents and attorneys were moved to non-contact visiting booths, which luckily our facility has quite a few of those type of booths. But there is some privacy issues with using those booths. They're kind of in a more public area. So we had to take that into account. We leaned on some video conference. We have 3 video conference equipment units in the jail. We utilize those as well, along with several telephone conferences. So a lot of my staff's, their work was kind of shifted from moving inmates to meeting rooms. And instead of doing that, they were supervising them when they were in with video conference equipment and stuff like that. All of the group programming was suspended. So all of our programming within the jail is all done by volunteers from the community. That would include Bible studies, AA, NA, groups like that. On March 13th, we suspended all of that as well. Family visitations for our adults were suspended. When that was put into effect, we worked with our inmate phone vendor, and we made an agreement where free phone calls would be added to our system for each inmate, kind of replacing that family visitation. So on March 17th, the sheriff's office scheduled a phone conference with judges, Washington County judges and district attorney's office. The main topic of that discussion was ideas for reducing the risk of COVID-19 while maintaining public safety. It was kind of a balancing act, for sure. A lot of different topics and ideas were kicked around at that meeting. Some of those were the immediate future of our work release program, how we were going to be utilizing electronic monitoring moving forward, handling of minor nonviolent warrants, open cases and scheduling adjournment dates within the court system, and taking some other strategies that we were passing on to municipalities, such as referring charges rather than arresting and dropping off at the jail when public safety was not an immediate issue. So looking at different things like that to kind of slow the traffic coming into the jail. On March 20th, that was when our biggest change to operations occurred. We effectively closed down our work release program, or our Huber program. So with work release, we had several inmates going in and out of the jail every single day for work. That kind of traffic coming in and out of the facility was, we were just not able to maintain that. Our facility is kind of all one building, and it's covered by all the same staff. It's not an isolated building, so we really could not continue operating our Huber program and maintain safe measures. So when we did, that was one decision that we really looked at closely, because everybody knows that employment is, the key to handling or a key to obtaining your basic needs and also reducing recidivism. So it was not a decision we put a lot of thought into it and made sure that we did it correctly. So part of that was evaluating all of our in-house Huber inmates and seeing who would be fit to go out on our electronic monitoring program. For those of you who don't know our program, electronic monitoring tracks inmates on the outside. They're basically on home arrest. They're tracked through a GPS bracelet. We also have what's called scram units, which is another type of bracelet where they do alcohol monitoring and that kind of thing through that. And so we went through our whole entire population, kind of picked out the ones that fit the criteria, and we felt were good candidates for the program. And over the course of 24 hours, we enrolled over 40 inmates on the electronic monitoring program. That in itself is a tremendous amount of work. They need to be enrolled in a computer system. They need to be fitted with a bracelet. The bracelets need to be programmed. All of their schedules and information needs to be going into the computer system as well. So it was a lot of my staff staying late hours, and we had kind of a process in place. We also received some assistance from Justice Point, who is a company who we obtain our electronic monitoring equipment through. They had out a couple of staff members to assist us as well. And overall, it went very, very smoothly. So that pretty much took our population on electronic monitoring from five individuals to 40. I think we were at 48 by the end of the day. This also marked the time when we started our 14-day quarantine for all subjects being brought into the facility. This was another challenge for sure for our facility. It's our jail is pretty much designed to handle maybe 18 individuals 18 individuals in single cell situations. We use those for custodies, new arrests, things like that. So obviously, if we're quarantining every single subject that comes into jail for 14 days, that was a huge population. So we shifted our special management unit into quarantine beds. That is 2 housing units, one that houses 5 and one that houses 18. We shifted that from general population to quarantine beds. We also utilized a couple of pods in our adult pod and maintained those also as quarantine areas. Other suspended services that we stopped, DNA collection, civilian fingerprinting, basically anything that was bringing in traffic from the outside into the jail. If we were able to suspend it, that is what we did. So that brings us kind of to the results of our efforts. We were very successful. Our in-house inmate population went from an average of 196 in February of 2020 to 123 in April of 2020. So that was kind of a combination of all of our efforts. Part of that was the group that went out to electronic monitoring. Another part of that was there were just less arrests that were being made and brought into the jail, less warrants being served as well. So this reduction in population, along with the closing of Huber, allowed us to close an entire floor of Huber dorms. So that would have been our second floor Huber area of our jail. We were able to basically close that, so we freed up staff. In doing so, we reduced our minimum requirements for officers by 1 officer per shift. So this greatly reduced overtime within the jail over the span of the pandemic. That kind of helped offset some of that lost revenue that we had with not having Hubers going in and out. So from March of 2020 to present, we have had 2 inmates test positive for COVID, and both cases were determined to have come into our facility with it, and both were discovered while still in quarantine. So there was really zero spread throughout the jail throughout the entire time of this. We had a handful of staff members who also tested positive. Luckily, those were kind of spread out over the whole entire course of the pandemic, and none of them were interrelated. They were all determined to be something like a family member or somebody else on the outside that they had contact with. So overall, we really came out of this very well. Everybody was healthy. My staff did great throughout the whole entire thing. We threw a lot of change at them, and by the end of it, they were still smiling. So that was definitely a good sign. And our inmates, I must say that when you throw this amount of change and this amount of restrictions on a population, you tend to get a lot of pushback. There was literally zero. I remember very, very little complaints from any of the inmates on the procedures that we had in place. So that went well. It went very well. So looking forward, kind we've been easing kind of back into this slowly, mostly because I want to continue to protect our what we're doing and not pull our restrictions too early. So we have started some of it already. Family visitations, we did put those back in place on a couple months ago, and those are put in place with more restrictions on the sheer numbers of visits that we were scheduling. So we're keeping those numbers down, but we did start family visitation back up. DNA collection and civilian fingerprinting were both started back up as well. And just recently, professional contact visits were also approved for the facility. So attorneys and probation agents can now meet with their clients within the jail. Moving forward, on July 5th is one of our first key dates. That is when we are planning on restarting our work release program from inside the jail. It's going to be a slow process. Over the course of the pandemic, I hired quite a few individuals. So I have a fair number of staff members who have yet to work with Huber and the procedures and scheduling and things like that. So we're going to have to ease into this a little bit to make sure that my staff is all up to speed as well. Once we do have Hubers coming in and out of the facility, it pretty much makes that quarantine ineffective because there's going to be contact and traffic throughout the jail. So when that Huber opens up on July 5th, that is when we are also planning on stopping our quarantine. So the quarantine will be ended, and we will shift our focus more for screening for symptoms at the time of booking. If somebody flags in booking with a symptom, then they'll be quarantined from there. So another reason to end the quarantine is it frees up our bed space, which we are anticipating more arrests, especially on warrants. A lot of those low-level warrants that were nonviolent offenders, municipalities weren't bringing them into the jail, but those warrants are obviously still active out there. So we're telling the municipalities at this point, or allow us a little time to get our Huber up and running and our quarantine beds cleared out. And then we're going to be opening back up to our pre-COVID criteria for accepting individuals into the jail. So we expect our bookings and overall population to increase over the next couple weeks and months. So that pretty much brings you up to date. Does anybody have any questions?
I'm going to start out by thanking you for all your efforts. Hearing that we never had any community spread in our jail is excellent news. Clearly, the procedures you put in place did a great job. I could envision that if COVID had gotten into that environment, it could have very quickly spread throughout the entire jail. So thank you for the good job with that. Do we know at all what percentage of our population there is vaccinated at this point? Do we have any data on that, or is that not something we can ask about? Or
we do not have data on that. I can tell you that towards the end of May, we worked with the health department to come in and offer the Johnson & Johnson vaccine to all of the inmates. My thought process on that was, we did have a number of individuals who had been incarcerated for a good period of time that may not have had an opportunity to receive the vaccination. Anybody else that was coming in from the street at that point did have that opportunity to receive the vaccination. So we picked a day and we offered it to all of our population. There was about 40 individuals that we did give the vaccine to. So that's kind of where we went with that.
okay, so 40 out of 120. So that means we know at least 33% of our population's vaccinated. And as you mentioned, a fair number of the population had an opportunity before being arrested and detained to get vaccinated and may or may not have. So, yep. Okay. All right. And then it sounds like you're looking at restoring all the civilian programs like AA meetings, NA meetings, Bible studies, that kind of thing in the next couple weeks. Is that right?
Yes, so we do not have a firm date on that as of yet. I'm kind of taking this pandemic as also a time to kind of reset all of our volunteer lists and
Yeah.
update all of that and make some procedural changes as well. So we can, and we're also doing that with our Huber program. It gives us a good opportunity to start fresh and make sure that we have current information and good solid procedures.
Okay, because I can imagine those programs are very important for reducing recidivism as well.
Yes.
So yeah, getting those back will definitely be good. Yep. Other questions? Oh, all right, so I actually asked Supervisor Markwartz on his behalf, so. All right, I don't see any other questions, so thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, next item on the agenda is a radio project. So Sheriff Schulteis?
All right, thank you. Just two real quick comments on the previous agenda item is that
Sure.
we had a tremendous amount of cooperation from all the sworn law enforcement in Washington County, from the sheriff's office to the municipal police departments that really worked well with the jail. And Captain Lehman was very, very modest. He was giving accolades to a lot of his staff, but that plan really came from the lieutenant and the captain in the jail. And as Chairman Bossert indicated, they did an outstanding job. So I'm really, really appreciative for all their efforts. So the radio project, I kind of have two different topics that I'd like to fill the committee in on. The first one is the kind of the current status of the project, where we're at, and specifically with the green sites, and that's the sites that we want to put towers up. There's two different sites, and so I'm going to have Captain Stacer kind of give you an overview of where we're at with those two green sites and the progress of the radio project itself. And then what we really wanted you to be aware of, and I have Margie is here. Yep. What I was going to have Margie do is explain to the Public Safety Committee the funding mechanism that the county executive and I have discussed and on how we plan on funding the project. And that's probably very, very important for you guys to know. So I'm going to hand the presentation over to Captain Stacer, who is kind of the lead on the radio project.
So the two things you talked about with respect to the green sites, the first is what we're going to call the Thompson property that's in front of you there. Last month, we had initially proposed building a second tower on the Aaron property, which was located north of the Aaron Town Hall. It's an abandoned quarry. It's where the existing tower is that we lease space from. And we had initially proposed putting a tower in that relative area, building a new tower, getting off of that for a number of different reasons: lease costs, the availability to be able to control what goes on the tower, how much, what type of equipment, things like that. Those discussions kind of stalled out in March and April for a number of different reasons. So ultimately, we started looking around at some other available properties that might fit this.
You want to make sure you're close to the microphone?
Sure.
Yep. Thank you.
So, and ultimately, this property is located at 6695 State Highway 175. It's the old We Energy substation. If you're familiar with that area, it's on the southeast corner of 167 and Highway 83. We learned that property was available and for sale. So we spoke with the landowner there. Ultimately brought this to administrative services for their blessing as to pursue this. And on May 5th, we entered into an offer to purchase on that particular property with the landowner. And so he accepted, and we've got 180 days to conduct our studies to make sure that site is going to be feasible for this tower. A couple of key points is there's already a pad there, as you can see from your aerial photography, where the old substation pad was. So we're going to see some reduced construction costs in the fact that it's there. You can see the compound will fit pretty much right in with where that old substation was. It's close to the road, so we're not talking about great lengths and bringing in, electric and different services like that. And it's gonna meet our microwave paths. This morning I got notification from FAA that says, it's also gonna meet their fly thing. So we're ticking them off, and it looks like it's gonna be a good viable site. So that's the first update. The second update is with respect to our site over in Ozaki County. So as you can see there from page 1, there's that little square in the upper,
Is that this packet here?
well, that's all Thompson, but you can see there's a little square on this here. Yeah, so you're gonna bring your attention to what's called
Okay,
identified as
gotcha.
Pinnacle.
Yeah.
All right, so the other green site is a site that we're gonna co-locate or share with Ozaki County. Conceptually, we've spoken with their administrator, and we're gonna share the costs in this site. They went to somewhat of a public meeting or an informational meeting, had some feedback from their citizens to ask them to just look at some other county-owned ground in that area. So they are doing that. They're just exploring the yays and nays of that particular ground. It may stay at Pinnacle. They may find out that another site is going to be more viable for both counties. But those studies are ongoing. Nonetheless, they're committed to building this tower with us, sharing the expense in this tower. And I think it's going to be a good opportunity for both counties to work together and to try to reduce some cost. One of the hardest things in this project was getting that microwave link down to our southern part of our county. And so this is why it's critical. There's a little bit of ridge that runs along Pleasant Hill Road, kind of southeast of Newburgh, that for years has been a problem getting a beam, getting it over that ridge. So we either needed to put another hop in Jackson somewhere or move the tower out to the east in Ozaki. So there's a lot of benefits in having a tower out there. First of all, we'll be able to make that microwave hop down to their Mequon Golf Course and then to Germantown, kind of going around that ridge. And the second thing is we're actually looking at Newburgh, which was kind of problematic for years and years and years. It's low. It's been hard to give it good coverage. What's interesting is we've always looked at Newburgh from the west looking east, and this gives us an opportunity to look at Newburgh from east looking west, and gives a little better coverage in that area. So we think that site in Ozaki County is going to work real good for us. So other than that, we did get approval from Kewaskum Village Board to we're going to removing that current tower. It's a lattice structure. We're going to be replacing it with a new monopole that's sufficient enough to hold this updated equipment. So that is done. We've got all the necessary approvals, both from FAA and from Village. And so I would say, as soon as we can enter into an agreement with Raycom or whomever our vendor is going to be, that we'll be able to start construction on that. So things are moving ahead. It's kind of at a snail's pace, but that's how it goes. We want to, from the beginning, we said we wanted to dot our I's and cross our T's and get this done right rather than having to go back and spend extra money. And so I think we're being diligent in our efforts there. So any questions with respect to that?
So we talked a little bit about line of sight and Newburgh. The Pinnacle site, is that up on a hill so that we'll have a better line of sight?
I'm trying to think what the elevation, I don't have it in front of me. It is on a slightly piece of elevated ground, but you can get it two ways, right? You can either get it through height of the antenna or by the topography of the land.
Yeah.
Both of which are kind of regulated by FAA. So if you've got a super high piece of ground, you may not be able to only extend the tower so high.
Yeah.
So we're going to extend it to the point that it works for both counties as far as radio coverage and for microwave hops. So I don't want to say it's, at least proposed wise, it's in the 280-foot range, 280
Okay.
to 300 foot.
And then there's a tower at Mequon. I'm assuming that's shared with Ozaki as well. Is
Right.
that an existing
That's an
tower?
existing tower. There's not going to be any build costs there. We are going to have to put equipment on that, basically a microwave dish.
Yeah.
And it's just going to be, and there's going to be no antennas on that tower. It's strictly for the microwave hop. So it just takes the microwave hop, spins it back to Germantown. So
Okay.
minor equipment there. Ozaki's good with it. There's plenty of room over there. There should be very minor modifications, and they're not looking to charge us anything for being on that tower. It's
Okay.
intergovernmental spirit agreement.
Yeah.
So.
And the citizens are concerned with the Pinnacle site because of the location. Anytime we talk about location of radio towers, I always get worried that no matter where we put it, whoever it's next to is going to be concerned with it. Are they likely to find a site that is more appealing to the residents, or is it just gonna be, we're gonna make a different group of residents angry if we switch the Pinnacle site a little bit?
Well, I think they want to do their due diligence in looking at some of these other proposed sites. And to be honest with you, I don't know whether or not these sites are going to be better or worse. This was the one that was identified by their radio administrator. So
Yeah.
he liked this site from the onset.
Yeah,
And so if this site has benefits over the other, they may just say they're going to go with it. And if they find something better, maybe they're going to go with that. But that's where that lies right now. And that's the
'cause
update I got.
the other thing I worry about is if we shift the site, does that affect our range of coverage?
Well,
Because we have the minor no coverage zones
right.
throughout the
And that's
county.
part
Yeah.
of shifting it is part of working and doing what's called a raptor study. And a raptor study, it shows all these little grids and squares to see how it is going to affect us. And so we haven't seen that study yet from the secondary site that they proposed, but we're going to be looking at that very carefully, as is Ozaki, because they got the same concerns, right? They want to
Yeah,
make sure that,
Yep.
Their northwest part of the county is being covered, and we're looking at our northeast. So
yeah.
we share the same concerns. We want to just try to do the best for both systems and for the constituents in both counties. So, and I think at the end of the day, that'll happen.
Okay, other questions? Okay, I think we have all the questions we need on that. And then were you also going to talk about funding, or is that Margie?
All right.
Margie? Okay.
Good morning. So right now, what we're looking at is issuing a debt sometime this year. We're looking at probably late quarter, third quarter, early fourth quarter, sorry. We have about 14 million right now is what we're estimating. We're gonna be working internally to finalize that number. We will need to have that finalized before we start the process. So the process will start soon, probably within the next couple of months.
Can I clarify, when you say about 14 million, is that the amount that we have ready to spend on the radio? Or is that the amount we're looking at costs that we need to borrow for?
That would be the amount we're looking to borrow for, the cost that
Okay.
we need to cover. So we do have some savings that we had previously set aside in old capital improvement plans for a jail expansion, which at this time we don't have any foreseeable need for. So we are exploring the possibility of repurposing those funds from one sheriff pot to the other and moving it to radio. That way we're not unnecessarily issuing debt and paying interest on it when we've got funds that are just kind of sitting right now doing nothing. So so that is one pot of funds that we are likely going to use. That will also help kind of fill in some of our spending requirements for the current year until we get that debt issue out. So our debt issue this time, we're going to be recommending a competitive bid process. Normally what the county has done in the past is just worked directly with an underwriter. We tell them what we want. They kind of write it up. They tell us what it's going to cost us and an interest rate on those issues. We pass it by resolution, and that's about it. When the competitive bid process, what'll happen is we'll actually work with a financial advisor. They'll put it out in the market. People will bid on giving us the money and how much they want to charge us for that. Usually we get a better interest rate when we do so, and considering the interest rate environment right now, I think we'd end up very favorable. So it's something new for the county, but it is, I think, it definitely to our advantage to do so. So we'll be starting to work on that process. I've already reached out to a financial advisor that we use for the county investments. They have a whole section of their company that this is what they do. The gentleman that is there, I've known in previous positions of mine, so I know they do a good job. So we're going to be starting to work on that. What'll happen is it'll generate about 2 to 3 different resolutions that will need to come to the board. So we'll be working with county attorneys and making sure that those are in the correct, process and form and everything that we need for that area. So we'll probably see the first one, I'm thinking in July or August, possibly into September, depending on how quickly we determine the funds will need to be issued. We don't want to issue debt too early because there is a spend down requirement that we need to spend the funds within a certain time period. That's because the feds don't want us holding on to funds and investing and earning interest on it. And so there is some additional tracking that we do as well when those idle funds are waiting to be spent. So we will work with our investment brokers like we did with the highway debt. We'll invest it when it's not being used. The additional interest earnings while it's not being used will then also be available for the radio project. And as long as we stay below what we earn is less than what we're paying, we don't, there's less concern about us having to issue a refund, what they call arbitrage. So we're getting all those ducks in a row just to make sure that all of our T's and are crossed and our I's are dotted. But you guys will definitely get a more complete timeline once we have all these details kind of worked out and when we will expect to have things coming to committee and board.
Okay, questions for Margie? Okay,
No.
seeing no questions, I
All right.
think you're off the hook.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, for our action item, it's been recommended that our executive branch still needs to do some work on the numbers. So it's been recommended that we not take action, but we still discuss it. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Sheriff Schulteis again.
All right, thank you. So the action discussion item is the restructuring of supervision in the investigative bureau. And this topic really is coming up just because of a unique opportunity where one of our lieutenants retired last month. And we could just simply fill the vacancy and continue on status quo. We talked about this internally, and we think we've come up with a way that we can increase our capabilities in the both the drug unit and the investigative bureau as far as being able to provide service to our community and also increase the supervision in both sides. So Lieutenant Tim Kemps is our lieutenant of detectives. He runs our general bureau right now. And I asked him to kind of speak on what we would like to see happen with long-term in our general bureau and our drug unit. So go ahead.
So just starting off, I'll quick kind of give a brief overview of the current structure and how it's designed between the multi-jurisdictional drug unit and the general bureau. So our drug unit is commanded by one lieutenant. Currently that's being filled by a day shift lieutenant. There's two of our detectives assigned to that task force, two investigators, and then the West Bend Police Department has two investigators assigned. Village of Germantown has one, Hartford has one, and then there's a part-time Kewaskum that provides some summer assistance. So that's what makes up that task force. The General Bureau that I'm currently in, I have 6 detectives, 1 investigator, and 1 evidence technician / custodian, and that person oversees all evidence. So they actually they serve the entire agency, both bureaus in their capacity, but is assigned to our side. So just as far as case volume that the General Bureau deals with, thus far this year, we've had 85 cases referred to us. 37 of those are currently open. I took over in February of 2020. So from February 2020 to the end of 2020, last year there was 144 cases assigned. 22 of those are open. And obviously there's some open ones from previous years going back to the 80s, some cold cases. But so certainly stay busy. To reiterate what Sheriff said, this really isn't about fixing something that is broken. But rather, taking a look at our methods and asking if it's still the most effective, efficient, and desirable way to provide our services to the community. And the opportunity, the time was now for a variety of reasons, some of which he discussed. But it's really, can we go from good to great is really, what we're looking at. So what are some of the limitations of having 2 totally separate bureaus? Number one, it promotes operating within silos. we share the second floor. The whole second floor kind of basically divided in two. There's a wall and a door that separate the units. And it really limits the free flow of information back and forth. Prior to COVID, they would have a weekly meeting between the two bureaus to kind of discuss that information, to give intel updates, and to provide any case assistance on overlapping cases. But there was not a lot of real-time information being passed. And it almost created an othering effect of us versus them, that wall, both physical and, mental, that was there. So going back to really February when I took over, one of the directives that I had received, one of the desires was to really start working on working together more. The drug unit really operates as a proactive unit, right? Their main mission is to proactively build large-scale drug cases through informant building and work their way up the chain. Where our bureau is much more reactive, right? We get a caseload, cases assigned, many of which come from patrol, come on up, and we work them hopefully to a successful conclusion. So they're really coming at it from two different ways. And the drug unit has kind of operated in that manner for the 19 years that I've been here, and I think beyond that. So what we're seeing now is so much more cases that overlap. When I started 19 years ago, a fatal drug overdose was rare. Unfortunately, now it's all too commonplace. We're dealing with them monthly, and we have the death investigators on my side, and we have the drug experts on the other side, right? So it makes sense that we work together, and just collaborate together. Put the subject matter experts at the problem to come up with the best solution. So we started doing that, and it's helped on a lot of cases. But what we still saw kind of unintended consequences of that were there's still two separate bureaus, there's still a wall, and there's two commanders. And a commander's job is really to make sure that this is running efficiently and effectively. And the commanders report to the ops captain, and that's not really, the ops captain shouldn't have to be dealing with, making sure that the two bureaus are working in the most efficient and effective way possible. So, and what we found was when there's still two separate units working the same problem, it created at times lack of direction, confusion, misunderstanding of roles, disagreement of roles. What bureau is primary on this problem? The bureaus use slightly different methodologies. So just who's in charge and whose ownership is this, right? Is kind of the issue we're seeing now. So after all that, you might ask, well, what's the need for two different units? Why not just have all major crimes under one? Which is a valid question, but the multi-jurisdictional drug unit is a unique thing. Number one, it's based largely on grants. It's multi-jurisdictional, right? So there's a lot of agencies, a lot of stakeholders here, not just our agency. And the other thing is it still is a different task. Their primary mission is large-scale proactive drug case building, where we're reactive trying to solve the major crimes. So they are very different, but very similar with a lot of overlap. So that's kind of where the ground base we're coming up from trying to do this. So the need for collaboration and the team approach, and how do we get from that good to great that I was talking about? Well, I kind of hit on it, but we utilize each person's expertise to fix, for the common good of the team, common good for all of our stakeholders to fix this problem. Many of our general bureau cases have a drug nexus that we don't have the expertise on, we don't have the current intel, and they can provide a lot of value there. Many general bureau cases that we're dealing with have a drug nexus. In fact, most of them. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there to build a large scale drug case, alongside whatever the criminal investigation that we're building. The other thing we're seeing, drug cases are getting more complex, and this is going to continue to go this way. dark web, Bitcoin. I had a presentation last week where the drug cartels are essentially using all cryptocurrency at this point, and it makes sense, right? Why have US dollars when you can do virtual? That's gonna funnel down to local drug dealers eventually when they realize too that that's the best way of doing business. A lot of our frauds have been dealing with that for the past year. So our staff is starting to get comfortable or get a working knowledge of it, I should say. So I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity there for crossover where, we need to stop looking at this as a drug detective or a general crimes detective. And, you're a major crimes investigator. And it really is about sharpening all of our skills. Skills are perishable. We have one of the general detectives will be going over to the drug unit shortly here within the next month to fill for an anticipated retirement. He's one of our better fire investigators. We've invested a lot of time and training into him, and we want to continue to utilize those skills and not just let them go away and have them only focused on drugs. So, kind of a good example on keeping people current and utilizing the skills that we've invested in them and put them through the training. I think we'll all have better flow of information under this proposed structure. Better lifetime intelligence, improve working relationships amongst investigators, and really just install a team environment across the entire second floor. Expansion of General Bureau to really breaking down those barriers, right? Having the wall structural. I looked into it. That can't come down, but having that door open and having more live time, just actual communication going back and forth. Hey, how can we help? Here's what we know. So some more of the benefits to the actual command structure change. I think, what I've touched on here hopefully was that the key is to get the two units working together as much as possible. And continuing on that philosophical change that, we're one unit, just separated by mission. So the time now kind of came through attrition, as he mentioned. The sheriff, the lieutenant had retired. He'd been up commanding that unit for like 17 years. So it was a time to, look, hey, is there something we can do here? And also there's one of the detectives will be, who provide a lot of experience, is going to be leaving. So I've got another detective that's going to be retiring this year. So there's a lot of movement, a lot of young blood coming up. So I think that is why the time. So I think if the going to 2 sergeants and 1 lieutenant, what that allows us to do is to continue to have that span of control, have a supervisor watching each unit, in control of 8 to 12 people. But then having that commander from the 30,000 foot view, just making sure that the mission vision is following through on working together. And that way the ops captain and the sheriff have one point of contact, to make sure that that's going through, and you don't have those potentially competing commanders, So I think it would clean it up that way. It also would allow for the detective lieutenant in the General Bureau. My current role has several other kind of secondary responsibilities. One is being the liaison for the district attorney's office. And to be honest, it's probably a third of my job is coordinating with the DA's office, not only about cases that we're involved in, but the entire agency. That takes up a lot of time. It would allow our patrol shifts have 2 sergeants and a commander. The patrol sergeants, frontline supervisors are handling the scheduling and that stuff. The detective lieutenants are handling all that frontline supervisory stuff as well as the administrative stuff. So it allows some time to concentrate more on the administrative end. And the key with that, I think, district attorney liaison position, one thing I've tried to focus on was when we get a case, we try to include on the bigger cases, we try to include the DA's office from the front end, get them on board, have them take some ownership in it, see how they want to see us proceed. And we have incredible success with getting prosecution that way because they were involved from the beginning. And one of the frustrations I hear from several of my staff that worked in the drug unit was they don't necessarily have that. Some of the cases don't get prosecuted, and that creates frustration. Well, I think one of the things we can do to fix that is, in my role, I can do the same thing that we did with the general side, get that ownership early on, make sure that we're getting what they want to make this case viable, with prosecutorial merit, and because if we're not, we're wasting resources and time. So I think it would greatly help with that. It allows, right now, the detective lieutenants are basically on call 24/7, and it would allow for potential spread out of supervisory hours, to just even load there and just to provide more coverage for management, to have those people there. And the other thing is, the sheriff mentioned it's kind of envisioned as a working sergeant. This is someone that can also handle a caseload, do their frontline supervisory to really help out the entire agency, because we're really having to prioritize cases, and unfortunately some cases have to just get put on the back burner, and the next day something else might come in that jumps that one, and you got the staff you got, and you fix the problems you can, but I think it'll allow us to operate a little bit more efficiently in that manner. So I think to close, the goal of the plan is the Washington County Sheriff would continue to maintain the Washington County Multi-Jurisdictional Drug Task Force as well as the Major Crimes General Detective Bureau as separate units. However, the new focus is on having these two units operate in a highly cohesive manner with a priority on collaboration. This will be accomplished by a change in command structure that will continue to allow for direct and separate supervision of each of the two units by the two new sergeant positions, maintaining a span of control. However, one commander will be tasked with overseeing both units to ensure that agency goals, vision, and mission are being met. We will influence and break down resistance to change by creating a team environment within the entire second floor and removing barriers, both real and imagined. This will allow the person to flourish and conduct their jobs most efficiently and effectively. So I think that's all I got for the proposal, but any questions?
Any questions or discussion on this? Thoughts? Because I think they are looking to make sure that we're comfortable with the approach they're taking. So kind of hearing from us that we're comfortable or we're not is, I think, beneficial for the sheriff's office. Yeah, go ahead.
So Lieutenant Kemp certainly was articulate in expressing the organizational desires. One of the things I just wanted to point out is he mentioned that the investigations are getting so much more complex, and that goes for both the General Bureau and the Detective Bureau. And so one of the things I did is I just kind of looked at, and I put it in the committee report, but looked at kind of the surrounding counties around Washington and the ratio of sworn deputies to detectives in each agency. Milwaukee County was the only one they didn't respond back, but the average for the rest of the counties around us is about 6 deputies per detective, that ratio. And right now our ratio is a little over 9 deputies per detective. So when I said that working sergeant type of position, that's what I meant by being able to increase our capacities a little bit. So if we consider both of those working sergeants, but their primary job is certainly first line supervision, that would bring our ratio down to about 7.5, a little closer to our surrounding counties. And the other thing I want to mention, so obviously one lieutenant, he was a veteran lieutenant, so he's top of the pay scale, benefits, or actually, I'm not sure if he had health insurance. So we're replacing it with 2 lower paid positions, but naturally, because there's 2 positions, it's still an increase in the budget because we're physically adding a personnel. So our county supervisor did an outstanding job, did a very, very thorough cost analysis of what the differences are, what it would cost, what we could do if we decided to do it this year versus next year. I don't think the county finance had a real good chance to look at that. So that's what we're just kind of asking to postpone the fiscal part of it, so we can give you maybe a little better indication of that.
And I think in my discussion with Marty, as we were compiling the agenda, there was a question as to whether this was better to wait till next year and do through the budgetary process. And I think my concern is why limp along for another 7 months and wait till then to make this change. If it's a good change to make, let's do it now and not wait. And I see at least one head nodding yes to that. So I like seeing that agreement. Questions or comments, Chairman Kriefel?
Yeah, thanks. I like the idea of creating efficiencies. That's what we're supposed to do in government. And how is this going to affect, is this going to affect our overtime a bit now that we have 2 additional sergeants that'll be able to be in operations? I know overtime is, we're short-staffed, to put it bluntly. And we need to address that, but this should help a little bit on some of the overtime, so we don't get people getting burned out.
Yeah, so it's in essence creating one additional position, which would be in the general bureau. And so yes, you're right, though, you're spreading out the workload a little more. Like I said, it's a working sergeant, but his primary job is supervision, but it certainly would spread the caseload out.
Okay. Yeah, I'd be well in favor of getting this done.
Yeah, my concern is, so right now we have the day shift lieutenant who should be his patrol duty. He's actually
Yeah.
assuming a lot of those
Yep.
patrol duties yet, but he's in the detective bureau right now. So we have basically a 33% gap in supervision out on the road right now that you're right. We have to keep that for 6 or 7 months if we're going to do it, probably even more than that if we're going to do it next year.
Yeah, so since public safety is our number 1 priority, if we're going to run shorthanded, we're actually, we're public safety to the detriment. We're not able to serve as well as we should be able to, or as well as we could. So like I said, I'm in favor of looking at this and even looking at further staffing down the road, making sure that we have the capacity and the staffing to properly serve our citizens. So, thank you.
Questions or comments? Supervisor Marquardt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One question to Marty about the ratio. Is that, I guess, like a point of we're understaffed in terms of detectives relative to the other, or is it more of a ratio thing than a staffing position issue?
So I think it's a little, I don't want to say fuzzy math, but so it's not taking into account the multi-jurisdictional drug unit, because there are detectives, but from different agencies. But all the other counties also have that, so that I asked them to take that into consideration. Yeah, so I don't, it's just the ratio is just different for our agency versus the other ones. They just have more detectives per sworn position. Now, what I probably should have done is looked at the total population that the sheriff's office serves and then compare that to population too. That might be an interesting stat, but I guess I can't really speak if it's which way it goes.
Okay, just a curiosity,
Sure.
That I had with that. Otherwise, Detective Kemp, so I think you laid out the argument very well. In reading the briefing, was thinking the same thing, that the overlap of crimes versus the drug aspect was obviously a big thing, and I think in terms of taking advantage of this change in personnel positions and things like that, I think this is a great opportunity to do that, and I also would agree to do it right away rather than try to, just get by with shifting people, a little bit here, a little bit there, and I think it's well worth the little bit of extra budget that it's going to take to accomplish this. Thank you.
As to kind of double down on the need now, there's going to be change is difficult, right, for anyone. People resist change, get used to doing things in one way. So there is some culture change that needs to occur here, no doubt. And I have no doubt that it will, and it'll be successful. But I think, when you have that personnel change at that time, getting new blood coming in, makes that creating that change a little bit more easy. Get that buy-in from them, from the staff, and that's where we have that window now where that change is coming.
So if I'm kind of reading the room correctly, it seems like we're all supportive of this change, and we're all supportive of doing it as quickly as we can. And so we just need the county executive's office to do their budgetary piece, and then we can officially pass whatever we need to pass here to make this happen. Yep. So, all right, I think
you.
we're done on that issue. And that's our last item. So our next meeting right now is scheduled for Wednesday, July 21st at 7:30, and we'll stand adjourned.